Hello, and welcome to Consciousness at Play, where every episode leads you on a journey of self-discovery. Today, we are joined by a special guest and a friend of the show, Diana Lomonte, right? Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, you
Perfect.
did. You did. Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, Diana is a good friend of mine, and we have been training in a non-dual Kabbalistic school for 3 years now. And yeah, I'm happy to have Diana on the pod after some time, and we're just going to sort of get to know Diana a little bit and figure out what has brought her to where she is in life. So, without further ado, here we are. So Diana, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing really great. Today's a good day.
Good, good, good. So yeah, if you could tell us just a little bit about yourself, your story, tell us about who little Diana was growing up. Um, yeah, we can start there.
Wow. Okay. Um, you know what the interesting thing is, if it's okay,
Sure.
I'm gonna fast forward to how I came to MFR
Okay.
and then go back to little Diana because honestly, I didn't know little Diana until I started my journey with myofascial release.
That's fair. All right.
That's
I love
real.
that. Yeah.
Um, Yeah, so Jihad asked me to be on the program, and thank you both again for having me here. It's wonderful to be able to share what I do, what I love, why I'm here. Um, yeah, I'm a myofascial release therapist. That is what I do. I'm a physical therapist licensed, but I do myofascial release now currently, which is a little different than traditional physical therapy. Like if you go to a traditional physical therapy office, you get some hot packs slapped on you and you get some exercises and you go on the bike and you might get 5 minutes of hands-on work with the physical therapist. Which unfortunately that's how our healthcare system is set up right now. It does work for a lot of different things. Like if you need to rehab from, a knee surgery or a shoulder surgery or whatever, that's fine. But for a lot of the people that I work with in pain, that just doesn't cut it. It's just not enough. You need to get in there and release the physical tissue, uh, which then can also, release the other things that we'll talk about. So anyway, the way that I came to myofascial release is I was working with kids for 10 years doing physical therapy, which I loved. I would teach them how to run and jump. Like the little ones, I would teach them how to crawl or walk. It was wonderful. And then I started to have a lot of pain in my own body. Um, I was a physical therapist in pain. I was helping other people, but I had no idea how to help myself. So I started down the route of traditional Western medicine. Going to doctors, they'd give me medications for pain, they'd give me neurological medications for pain, or they would tell me it was all in my head and I had to see a psychiatrist. And, I tried the antidepressants and I tried the anti-anxiety medications. And then I tried the traditional physical therapy because, like I said, I worked with kids. I didn't really know what to do with my adult body. And my pain just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I kept feeling more and more disconnected from, let alone who I am, but like anything. I felt like I didn't belong in the world. And I was really scared for a few years. I had never been in chronic pain before. And it just felt like I was seeing my hopes for life being taken away from me.
Mhm.
I just couldn't physically do any of the things that I love to do. And, when you're in pain, you start disengaging because you don't want to be out at a party in pain. You don't want to be, you just don't want to be in pain. You want to be out doing life. So then when I literally felt like I was at the end of my rope and I broke down to a friend, I really felt like, I have to stop doing physical therapy because I couldn't physically practice anymore. She turned to me and said, "Have you ever heard of myofascial release?" And as a physical therapist, I had never even heard of it. And I tried it. After 2 or 3 sessions, I felt like I had hope again. I felt like I was getting my life back again. And then I questioned, well, I'm a physical therapist. How did I not even know that this existed? And that's when I decided that I had to practice it because not enough people knew that it existed and I wanted to share it. And it gave me my life back. You know, I can keep going. I can tell you more about my story. But yeah, I guess this is the first time, like, I don't know how like the questions go back and forth. So um,
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. I mean, how does self myofascial release differ from traditional physical therapy?
yeah, so like I already mentioned a little bit, like if you say you have a back pain, or let's take a knee pain. A knee pain's easier. You'll go to your doctor. They'll say, okay, I'm going to send you for physical therapy for your knee. You go to the physical therapy office. They look at your knee and only your knee, and they don't look at your hip, and they don't look at your lower back, and they wouldn't even dare touch your head. Like, that's so far from the knee. You know, they might check out your ankle, but for the most part, they'll go and look at your knee and only your knee. And then, like I said, they might put a hot pack on your knee. They might do some ultrasound on your knee. And unusually, all of this stuff is done after the initial evaluation. This stuff is done by an aide or a PT assistant. It's not actually done by the physical therapist.
Mm.
It's done by somebody else. And then you'll get some exercises. You'll get thrown on the exercise bike, all for your knee, for nothing else. And then maybe for the last 5 minutes of the session, the physical therapist will see you and like touch your knee, maybe do some joint range of motion, maybe do a couple of stretches, and then you're out. So you really only get maybe 10 minutes at some clinics with the physical therapist. Um, for the most part, it's a lot of other things than manual therapy. When I see a patient, it's one patient with me, and my hands are on them for the whole hour. And I'm not only looking at their knee, I'm looking at their pelvis. And if their pelvis is off, then that's going to throw off their gait, which is going to possibly cause knee pain. I'm going to check out their lower back. If they have tension in their lower back that's throwing off their pelvis, that could be causing their knee pain. I'm going to take a look at their neck. I actually just this week worked on someone who came in for a hamstring pain, so like a pain behind his thigh. And at the end of the session, he was like, "Do you realize you spent way more time on my neck than on my hamstring?" And I was like, "I know." And literally, he told me the next day he was moving so much better. You know, a little bit of the pain was still there, but he overall, his whole body was just moving better because he had so much tightness here that, like, even just from doing that, you could see that affected my whole body positioning. So like people don't, at least in the traditional Western model, like I said, it's like you get that prescription, you go and they look at your knee and only your knee, and they're not usually addressing the whole person.
And have you ever heard of Paul Chek by chance?
His name has come up. I don't know a lot about him, but yeah, I,
Okay. Well, you're speaking his language, and I'm in the Czech Institute, so a lot
oh,
of my certifications are through them, and you're speaking our language, which is really cool because my story is similar in that I learned about like the interconnectedness of our whole body by going through a sports injury. And I went through like 3 rounds of PT and nothing worked. And then I ended up getting referred to a health coach who was like, I know somebody who can help you out trigger points in myofascial release. So I started like traveling around and like spending lots of time and energy finding people who were well versed in this. So I think a lot of people's story to finding different modalities comes through that way of kind of like throwing everything at the wall and seeing whatever sticks. Because similar to what you're saying, what we're taught is like there's a hierarchy within our body. So your neck is the most important thing compared to, say, your knee or your ankle. Like you need that, your ability to breathe, your hearing, your sight. Those things are a little bit more important, and that's in your head, but you're going to the doctor for your ankle. So learning that was game changing for me. Um,
Yeah.
so kind of, you know, how, so in terms of the long-term effects of removing, say, the neck pain,
Mhm.
how does that affect kind of the rest of the body, would you say? Like, does it have an effect on how you move? Because obviously you're going to stand up more straight, but are there other things that kind of have an effect?
Yeah. Um, Absolutely. And before I answer the question, just to speak to what you were saying, um, that's great to hear. And that's a lot of what I hear from a lot of my patients. I've tried acupuncture. I've tried this. I've tried that. I've tried the medications. I've tried, and then it's usually people are like, I will try anything just to not be in pain. And then somehow they find a myofascial therapist. And that's not to say that the other things don't work, but for me, acupuncture had a plateau. um, Chiropractic never worked for me. Some people love it. But it's a common journey of like, okay, I'm willing to try anything because there's got to be more to life than this. Um,
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
yeah.
I don't
And
know. And for
yeah.
me, if for me, it was kind of like learning that the trigger points kind of the whole body is going to work as like a chain, so to speak. So if one chain's off, the rest of them are going to kind of deal with the effects of that, not that part of the chain not doing what it's supposed to do. And like thinking of the human body in that way, because when I would go to the physical therapist, like you said, they would only look at my ankle. They do ultrasounds, icing, heating, cooling, exercises, but like nothing about my lower back, nothing about any other part of my body was even looked at. And it's really unfortunate though, because a lot of people walk around with pain, as you probably know, and they're just simply like the people that they're working with they just don't know. So they are doing their best at a certain point. They just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
that's why I appreciate the opportunity to educate people because I really believe in what I do. And I'm hoping that at some point it is known about and available to all people, not just the people that stumble upon it. I'm hoping at some point self care is taught in schools, like brushing your teeth is important, taking care of your body is important. So that's a whole nother conversation. But it's like I feel like we don't learn enough about our own bodies until you're in pain or there's a problem, rather than preemptively, oh, this is what I could do for my body every day in order to make myself feel good in the long run.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's an interesting segue. The teaching kids or making kids aware of their body and how it moves. And you mentioned that you have experience with that. Um and I do want to give you like the platform and the time to kind of go into that a little bit more. But what I noticed for me as a kid growing up, being involved in sports and moving my body in different ways allowed me to become more familiar with just maybe the body's natural intelligence and coordination and these things. So what is it like working with kids? How do you teach them make them become aware of the relationship with their body? How do you go about it? Because I'm sure you have to like sort of bring it down a little bit, of course, when you're speaking to kids.
Yeah, yeah. So working with kids doing myofascial release is so much different than, so like I said, before I started the MFR, I worked with kids for 10 years doing traditional PT with kids, which was, school-based for the most part or home-based, teaching kids that were a little bit developmentally delayed to come up to speed with their peers.
Mm.
And oftentimes, that looked like the clumsy child who would, kind of trip over their own feet or walked up the stairs one at a time, didn't know how to alternate. Um, so teaching them about their bodies is really just making everything into a game somehow. Like the occupation of children is play. So everything would become a game somehow. And then manually moving their bodies, usually. Like if a child wasn't alternating on the stairs, I would get behind them and I would like literally physically move their legs to help them learn the pattern while they were going to get a puzzle piece or a piece for a game or something, and then we'd go back down the stairs and the game or the puzzle was at the bottom of the stairs. So that's different than teaching kids in a myofascial way. When I teach kids from myofascial release about how to get in touch with their body, it's the same way that I work with adults, honestly. Like, I'm asking them what they feel, how they feel, where they're feeling, because kids are a lot more in tune with what they're feeling, usually, not all the time, but usually, than adults. Because as adults, oftentimes we've gotten conditioned out of completely feeling what we're feeling, whether it was being told not to feel our emotions as a child, or um, just being told to suck it up and push through because you have to go do something. So now you're pushing your body, which is also pushing yourself emotionally, because it's like, I can't, I'm in pain. I'm whatever. I'm not feeling good today. So in all these ways, like, adults have learned how to push themselves and not actually be in touch with what they're feeling. Um, so working with a kid, getting them to feel, is usually a lot easier than working with an adult.
And it seems like you're talking about like several different layers at once, right? Like what you're feeling physically, emotionally, like kinesthetically. So I just find it interesting how all of it plays a role or has a place, like as we're learning in the school, right? To like really feel these things and to decondition ourselves. I think that I would love to shine a light on that for our listeners, or just for people in general. Like when you're feeling something physically, there's probably something else that's connected to it as well.
That's
Overlap.
totally, totally. And that's the beauty of what I really wanted to share about MFR. And also, to go back to David's question, because I never actually answered it. Like, the beauty of myofascial release and pain relief is that usually people come to it because my neck hurts, my shoulder hurts, my knee hurts, something hurts, and they can't go about their day. But they don't realize that there is a mental emotional relationship there. And that is also what our traditional Western society or medical system doesn't really address. They don't get into the mental emotional stuff. And a lot of times people don't know what they're getting into when they come for myofascial release. I start working on their neck, and all of a sudden they're like, why do I feel like I need to cry? And I give them permission to give themselves permission to cry for the first time, because they've been holding in those tears from whatever happened in their childhood. Um, there, you can't separate out the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And once you start opening up the body, so often, like I said, people start feeling like they need to cry. All of a sudden, they feel angry. All of a sudden, a lot of times, memories come up. And I was once working on someone with lower back pain. And in the first session, he said to me, wow, I just had this memory of when I jumped off my parents' bunk bed when I was 5 years old. And the next thing I remember, I was in bed with my parents, and I don't remember the fall. I don't remember what happened after that. So, like, there was a lapse in time, and somehow that memory was stuck in his body, and that's called tissue memory. Like, your
Mm.
tissue literally remembers. And again, these are the things that are not addressed in Western medicine. It's like you go to a psychiatrist for one thing, you go to an orthopedist for another thing, you go to a nutritionist for something else. There is no overlap of, like, the holistic view that there is a connection with all these things. And that's to answer David's question before about, like, the neck and what that channel is. Um, on some level I can say, and on many levels I can't say. Um, Most people store a lot of tension in their neck. They have the weight of the world on their shoulders, or they're protecting, or possibly they were told to shut up as a child, or
Yep.
they were never allowed to find their voice. Um, so funny, I often lose my voice. I feel myself getting a little raspy. So, um,
It sounds like you're aware of like the chakras and how the shoulders and the neck is kind of the communication, so to speak. And I feel like a lot of people have trouble with communicating in general in our society. Like I'm not good enough, or people won't accept me. And I feel like, it's a common thing. But in your like experience working with a lot of people and maybe even yourself, are there certain parts of the body that you think hold a greater amount of tension that maybe needs to be addressed first? Or are there places that maybe, deserve a little bit more attention than others in the body?
Yeah, that's an easy and a difficult question because every body is different.
Hmm.
Every body has had a different journey. They've walked in different shoes, literally and figuratively. Um, they have been affected by their family as a child in different ways. They've been affected by their environment, and into adulthood in different ways. I would say for the most part, a lot of people's pelvis is off. We look at the pelvis as the foundation of your house. And if your foundation is off, it's going to throw everything off. So I
Hmm.
usually start by looking at people's pelvis and trying to balance the pelvis. But a lot of times I can balance the pelvis by looking at their neck.
Mm.
And so for me, I would say the neck and the pelvis directly are the two areas. Even if someone comes in for knee pain, I'm working on their pelvis and I'm working on their neck, and not in a cookie cutter kind of style, but just generally because of that nature of the foundation or the root chakra. Your foundation needs to be stable. And also, as you already said, a lot of people do have a problem with their voice, or just, they're protecting, they're holding back. So a lot of times I will see someone come in and, yep, okay, you're coming in for knee pain, but their neck has the tight, the most tension in their body. Like I could literally sometimes, see veins or like fascia popping out of their neck.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, because I have a little bit of training in kind of analyzing posture. So what you're saying is aligns with exactly what I've been taught. But for me personally, in my journey, which I've shared in previous episodes, but I had a dislocated jaw that was disrupting pretty much the balance of the rest of my body. But once we were able to, you know, get the jaw back into its socket, everything else just kind of fell in line, like you're holding, I don't know, a chain or something up. Everything just kind of fell right to where it was supposed to be. So um, it makes sense that somebody's neck, kind of relieving that area, would have an effect on everything below it and above it as well sometimes, because um, our bodies are special and it knows what it's doing if you put it in the right environment and circumstances.
yeah, completely. Here's a great analogy. A lot of people, without, like I said, a lot of people come in for something else. I work on their neck. They'll come back and say, "Oh my goodness, I was able to like turn my head while I was driving instead of having to turn my whole body to look to look behind them when they're, trying to park or whatever." And even if you just think about that movement, if you're doing this, that could cause hamstring pain.
Yeah.
But if you release the neck and all of a sudden they're not straining every time they're driving to look behind them, now that's going to take some tension off their hamstring.
100%. If you're working in a grocery store, for example, and you're always, uh, ringing items in one direction and you have a tightness in your neck, eventually, oh, my lower back hurts. Why does it hurt? I'm sitting down. Because you're moving in one direction the whole day. So I
Exactly.
think bringing awareness to what you do, your lifestyle, is really helpful because then it makes your job easier and it makes whoever's kind of dealing with the issue more self-aware so they can kind of work towards getting healthy themselves as well. But I'm curious though, like, if from a broad perspective, because it seems like you have a holistic viewpoint of the body and being healthy in general.
Mhm.
I'm curious to see outside of in addition to myofascial release, what are some other pillars? Because in my mind, I feel like similar to what you said earlier, um, these things should be taught to kids, right? Kids should be given the education of how to be healthy in the world without just being thrown into the world with, microwave food, all types of things that are probably not the best for them. But are there any pillars you think are like, if you had a patient that didn't even know where to start, what kind of advice, recommendations would you get to them?
Yeah. I got a few things. That's a great question. Um, First of all, right in line with what you were just saying about like learning lifestyle and, noticing, are you always moving in one direction? One of the first things that I give patients to do as homework, as an exercise, is to do a body scan. And I'll talk them through it during the session. Usually I'll start at either the feet or the head, whatever feels right at the moment. And I'll just first ask them to breathe and see if they can bring their breath into their feet. And then notice what their feet are doing. And then bring their breath into their ankles and then into their lower legs and working up the line. Because a lot of people, like we talked about before, don't really feel their bodies. They're just
Mhm.
kind of moving and they're doing, and that your body is moving, but people aren't actually aware. Oh wow, I was like scrunching my toes in this weird way and I didn't even realize it. Or a common thing is, being at your computer desk or wherever and your shoulders are up to here. So it's like by first just bringing awareness and doing that body scan, and then learning to do it multiple times throughout the day. Like I've learned to do it almost constantly, checking in with my body instead of being so, ingrained in what's going on in the outside world, that you're holding tension in weird places that you don't even realize. So body scans are one of the first things. I think meditation, at least for myself, is super important. There was a time in my life where I tried to sit to meditate and I felt like I was going to jump out of my skin. Around the same time that I found MFR, or myofascial release, I learned to meditate, and it's been one of the most calming, grounding, centering things that I could do. And whenever I'm starting to feel a little frazzled, and I do it regularly, but also if there's ever a time where I'm like, okay, I need a little extra, I'll just sit and meditate, and it brings me back to myself instead of getting swept up in whatever else is going on in my external world that I can't control. Another important thing is not just getting treated, but learning self-care. So during everybody's first session, I give them this little ball and I tell them it's like my hands at home, and you can put it anywhere you feel like you need, and you can literally just lay on it and breathe into it and stay present with it. A lot of people are like, oh, I was like watching TV last night and I was like, yeah, because you were watching TV and focusing there instead of on what your body was doing. So, and that's the other thing that I hope someday could get taught in school. It's so easy. Just like every kid gets a toothbrush and they have to brush their teeth at night. Oh, you got a boo-boo? Okay, like take your little ball and go and lay on it. And oh, you feel how tight that is? It's funny. It's a common misconception that people are like, oh, like they're kids. A lot of kids have tightness in their body. And as soon as I draw their awareness to it, they're like, oh, yeah, that is tight. Would you look at that? So, rather than waiting until you're 35, 40, 55 to start releasing your body and you have all of those years of tension built up, you can do a little bit with your ball every day.
And once you release that tension, your life changes. It's almost like night and day when your body can have full range of motion, or it feels like loose again. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
While,
Yeah.
while while we're talking about that, one of the things we brought up on another episode is the perineum. If you're familiar with that, like a lot of people have, it's constantly clenched and tight.
Yeah.
And what are some benefits, I guess, from being able to relax? We're talking about the pelvis, the root chakra, right? What is some benefits to be able to be relaxed in your perineum, in the seat of your being?
Um, on a physical level, literally what you just said, being relaxed in your seat. If you are constantly holding tension there, it's going to trickle up and it's going to trickle down. Um, in a spiritual way, it's being relaxed in yourself, being
Mm.
being grounded in yourself instead of. And I guess to explain this point, I'm gonna go back to your initial question. What about little Diana? Um, because of my childhood, it wasn't until I came to myofascial release that I realized I was always up here. I was
And I'm sorry for our listener, she's pointing to her head.
Oh, okay, that's right. I'm like, I see you. I'm just assuming everyone's watching it. Yeah. And see, there you go. That was me not being in my head. I have learned to not be in my head constantly. Um, but yeah, so if you have tightness down below, like it's often comes from, trying to be too controlling in a way of what is going on around you. And for myself, that came from, being in a very, it's weird. My childhood on many levels was stable. But I grew up with a dad that was very unstable. Um, kind of never knew what I was walking into. Like I would tiptoe up the stairs and put my ear next to the door just to kind of get a faint sense of what mood my dad was in and whether I actually wanted to walk in or just go straight to my room. And so I was always hyper aware of what was going on in my environment in order to keep myself safe. Um, and so like I said, I was always in my head. I was always trying to figure out what was going on. And I did end up having a lot of tightness in my pelvis overall, and that includes the perineum. um, because I had no grounding. I had no sense of my own self. I couldn't care about what I needed because I needed to care more about my environment in order to stay safe. And I think that's
Uh,
a lot of people's experience. Not everybody, a lot of people I'm sure have great childhood homes. Um, and there are a lot of people that I work with that have a similar story.
Yeah, I had something similar growing up as well with my father, where his mood kind of dictated the way the house felt.
Yep.
And you definitely learn to kind of go off of how they're feeling. And then it does give you a sense of uneasiness in your body, almost to the point where you disassociate as a child. And then eventually you learn once you become older or you come across information that opens you up to it, like, oh, I'm really can't feel my body. Like I had no idea what's going on. So lots of people I'm sure walk around where they can't even listen to simple impulses that are natural to humans. Am I hungry? Do I need water? Do I have to use the bathroom? All those things kind of you disassociate so much that that becomes your norm. And it's really unfortunate because you do lose your healing, your inner voice. And I'm curious, like you did mention the body scan, but in terms of like listening to your inner voice, what's the importance of that, and how would you, recommend or guide somebody into tapping into their own wisdom and inner voice?
Yeah. Again, that's a great question, and that is also a big part of what I do. I am I'm constantly trying to get people to feel inwards. The importance of it is exactly what you just said. We all have an inner voice. Whether it is just, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Um, do I need to go to the bathroom? Or what is my purpose in life? What do I want to do? Not what are my parents telling me I need to do? And if we start going down other people's path and listening to their voice, then we're denying our own authenticity. And that's when people start to get pain in their bodies. Honestly, a lot of times big growth and change in people's lives come with releasing the body, releasing the pain, and getting them back in touch with their own inner voice. And the way in which I do that is starting to get people to feel, just starting to get them to notice that they have a leg, and it's their leg, and it's connected to their chest, and it's connected to their head. And once people actually start to get in touch with their own feeling sense, and past stuff starts to get released, that's when the inner voice starts to come through a lot more. I mean, I could elaborate on that. There's so much to it.
For sure. And it makes me think of what Jihad just mentioned about the perineum. It's like our body and our mind and our psyche, they oscillate. So one could release the other. And either way, like if you may work super hard with my journey, I'd spend a lot of time in my head, listening to philosophy, spirituality, meditating. But it wasn't until I added in releasing my fascia, proper stretching, nutrition, that everything kind of came together. And I'm like, oh, everything, it all has a place. And I think I like what you said because, um, it's just really important. It's really important.
So I'm curious, Dinah. I've always loved sports growing up. Dave also shared how, he has a athletic background. Have you always been a kinesthetic person, kinesthetic learner, or just a person?
Uh, it's funny, yes and no.
Mm.
Um, I was when I was a kid, I wasn't into group sports. I'm an introvert by nature, and I didn't realize that until later on, that that's why I wasn't good at group sports, because I didn't get the dynamic of, like passing the ball, or like I'm also a very sensitive person, so a lot of times group sports were just too overstimulating for me. Again, things I realized when I was adult, and when I was a kid, I just felt like I don't belong here. um, but and so then as a child, I was overweight, and made fun of a lot for it. And then when I was 11 years old, because my parents were concerned, and thankfully they didn't, that was one thing they did really right. They didn't overtalk it. They just put me in karate, and I fell in love with it. Like I know a lot of kids wind up getting body issue, um, stuff because their parents overtalk their weight issues. And I'm not saying it's an easy thing. It's a hard thing. That's a whole other conversation. Anyway, when I got into karate, that's when I fell in love, and I realized I was a kinesthetic person. I was overweight as a child because I wasn't getting enough movement, and I needed it, and I craved it, and I had no idea. So once I got into karate, I fell in love with movement, with exercise. And then my own brain like pieced together, like, wow, I really needed this and I wasn't getting this. And that's how I did come to do physical therapy, and with children at first, because I realized that, a lot of people don't realize the connection of, needing that physical movement for their body, and how important exercise and lifestyle is. And yeah, I am a very kinesthetic person. Like I need the movement. I crave the movement. I realize that maybe not everybody does, and they need that push.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that sort of like segues a little bit to the next question. I have a personal training background, and a buddy of mine, he's a firm believer that self myofascial release is bullshit. He personally thinks that because he's shown me studies that support both, that say like it is effective, and studies that says it isn't. And so he has the perspective of like when you walk into the gym, ditch the foam roller, just go work out, don't be a wuss. And I'm a person who's like, I'm fighting him because I'm like, when I foam roll my quads, I feel a world of a difference. Like I'm able to sit in like a lotus position, you know what I mean? Like I can feel the release. So what would you say to a person like that who doesn't believe, or has his own perspective?
So there's two parts to it. One is that the person has to be open and ready. If he's trying to foam roll around, and again, if his mind is somewhere else, but he's moving, oh, I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna get that. Ah, forget it. Like he's not in his body. He's not really feeling it. He just wants to get on to the next thing. So he's not present with what he's doing in the now anyway. So the person has to be open and ready. And back to what we were saying before, oftentimes that comes when people are in pain, when they have tried everything and they're like, I am at the end of my rope. I am willing to do anything. And that's when you wind up saying, okay, I'm going to learn to slow down. I'm going to learn to be gentle with myself by, you know, a trained therapist talking you through that process. It often comes out of desperation, you know, and it's like, okay, I've done all the pushing, I've done all the movement, you know, and I want to get back there. That's when people often have their, you know, when people wake up, it's like, I need this. I can't afford to not do this anymore.
And
Um, yeah.
I just want to say it seems nuanced because your personal training friend may have seen a study that tested athletes before a 100-meter race and did myofascial, releasing muscles and massaging help them when maybe they need to be tense before a race compared to somebody who has trauma stored in their body. I feel like it's a nuanced thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many nuances to it. It's, I agree 100%.
Yeah. Um,
Then there's
yeah.
also, you know, any research study could just, you know, I honestly, I don't usually believe research until I've seen it over and over, you know, like one study is one study.
Hmm.
Yeah, and personal experience matters. Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. You know, I I wasn't ready. That's the other thing. Like I said before, I used to try to meditate. I felt like I was going to jump out of my skin. I was like, you know what, forget it. I got something else to do. You know, I used to try to stretch. It was like, no, I just want to go and deadlift, or I just need to, you know, go out for a run. I was one of those people. It wasn't until the chronic pain kept slowing me down that I was like, I have to listen. I have to slow down. I have to be gentle with myself. And I have to actually listen to my body. And it actually took me throwing out my back 3 times at deadlifting, you know, after I had healed from my back pain initially. And it's like, I know I still have herniated discs that I manage. There were 3 different times that, you know, this little voice in my head was like, maybe you're done. And I was like, no, I got 3 more reps. I'm going to finish. And next day, I can't move. Second time, I noticed this little tingle in my leg. And I'm like, no, I got 3 more reps, you know, whatever it was. Throw out my back. It probably took until at least the third or the fourth time that I was like, oh, there's that tingle in my leg. I'm going to stop right now. And then I'm going to go on my foam roller or use my little ball. And I'm going to release some things because my workout is done, no matter how badly I wanted to finish that workout. So, like I said, unfortunately, it often comes out of, you know, desperation, and like you've had so many years of like giving up on the foam roller that now your body's like, no, I'm tight as hell and I need some help, and you got to listen to me now.
Hmm. And there's so much overlap to being able to amplifying and increasing the volume on that inner voice. Because if I think about my day to day, we have choices, right? Small and big. But once you practice working with your inner voice, the benefits, I think, affect your whole life and everybody around you. I think just being able to hear that. And I'm curious, so are you familiar with, or how do you feel about the concept of releasing the abdominal wall, doing, fascial work on the stomach? Because I know some people, it can be a place where I'm not touching it. It could be dangerous, etc.
I work on the abdomen a lot,
Cool.
um, for 2 reasons. Oftentimes anxiety is held in the abdomen. You know, it's also related to your breathing. If you have tightness in the abdomen, you're not going to be able to breathe effectively. Secondly, I deal with a lot of people that have, whether it's breathing or digestive issues because of abdominal scars from a multitude of surgeries. You know, the common ones are C-sections, hysterectomies, and hernia repairs. And, you know, I've seen amazing things happen to people by working on their abdomen. And I get it. It's not something that I learned in PT school, really. Like we just didn't, it's like, oh, that's your internal organs. You don't, but it's still part of your physical body. Um, but yeah, a lot of people, it's amazing. You would think you touch someone's abdomen, it's going to be squishy. And a lot of times it's not, it's hard as a rock. And there's no question as to why they have bowel and bladder issues, and just overall anxiety. Because if you have all this tightness in your digestive region, of course that's gonna cause some anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can't breathe into the base of your spine, like air is just not getting there. And also it's just not getting the proper pumping action that our bodies are made to have. So for me, working on my abdominal wall years ago, like doing it once, maybe dealing with the trauma I had growing up, like has long lasting effects. I haven't really done any like work in there in many years, but still my breathing ability, I'm able to fully extend my stomach. I'm able to get a good breath in. And like the work that you do on people has lasting effects. So at least in my experience, I think that's for most people. Wouldn't you say like it does last for a while?
That's that's great to hear. I'm happy to hear your experience. I love that. It's like I don't care if I worked on someone. I just want to know that their lives have changed, and yes, it's the work does last. Oftentimes people don't even feel a change right away. It could take a couple of days, and then once you release something, that area of your body has changed in relationship to the rest of your body. And like we've already talked about, you can't separate the mental, emotional, spiritual piece of it. So, like, once you release something, that channel has opened. And people aren't always aware that it was because I worked on them that they started crying later that night, or that they had a fight with their boyfriend, or, whatever. It happens. And that's going to catapult change. It's going to be the catalyst. And yeah, and as you already said, once you start to change it in a way, I hate to use the word force, but it allows those around us to change as well. Like, if to go back to our previous analogy, if we stop holding back, if we stop biting our tongue, if we let our voice out, and now we're bringing up things in our relationships that we were too afraid before because we didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or we were so used to people pleasing that we just always held back. Now we're speaking up. Now we're saying no when we always said yes. That's going to force that other person to either change, or just the relationship dynamic to morph into something different.
Yeah, having
Absolutely.
having access to your truth, and allowing everyone to sort of play their role, so to speak. But yeah, I agree with you guys. um
100%.
I actually had another question from my personal trainer friend. He's dying for me to ask this question to you. he he
I want
actually
to
he actually phrased it too. He said, tell your guest that you can't get into the psoas muscle.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, um, I don't know about that. Maybe I can pose it as a question, but he's convinced that like you can't get into the psoas. And I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not a physical therapist, so I don't know if that's true or not. But is there any truth to it?
I get into the psoas every day.
Oh, oh, you
I
hear that, Patrick?
I teach people. That's usually the first thing that I'm telling people to work on with their little ball, because it's one of the easiest. It's the easiest place to start self-treating. Again, if someone is open to it.
Ooh, I think we might have to provide your info, just in case someone needs to reach out and release some stuff.
Absolutely.
The psoas is the fight or flight.
Exactly. Exactly. Most people are tight in their psoas, whether it's from fight or flight, or whether it's just from having a desk job. It's your hip flexor. So if your hip is in a flexed position, a shortened position all day long, it's going to be tight. And then when you go to stand up, it's going to pull on your lower back, and that's going to cause lower back pain. So, can you get into the psoas? I mean, absolutely. Do I think I can put into words on a podcast how to do that? No. So the funny thing is, with myofascial release, I could talk until I'm blue in the face about what it is and how this works and how the tissues release, but it means absolutely nothing until somebody can actually feel it. It's an experiential thing. Um, it really does. I'm not going to say I love talking about it. And, for anybody listening to this that has never experienced it, I highly recommend that if any of what we're saying resonates with them, or even if it absolutely doesn't, you have to feel it. Because as we were saying before, so many of us have been disassociated, whether because of childhood trauma, whether, even if it was just like another type of trauma. It didn't have to be childhood trauma. It could be a car accident that just left them afraid of the world and, totally in fight or flight. They could have been in, I don't know, all the traumas. So because so many of us have learned to disassociate in different ways and don't realize that we're in this disassociated state, it takes that physical connection. It takes me putting my hands on someone and inviting them in to feel their own body, possibly for the first time ever, and working through whatever emotion comes up for them, working through whatever trauma needs to come up, working through possibly even their just discomfort with being touched.
Mm.
Sometimes I have to ask permission to even put my hands on someone, and I will like literally like hover until they will let me touch them, um, so that they can start to come in and feel themselves. So, like I said, for anyone that, thinks that any of this resonates with them or it doesn't, and they just want to know more about myofascial release after listening to this, like, this is not enough. Like, actually feeling what is happening is how you release and you get in touch with yourself again.
Yeah, and for people that are open-minded, in my personal experience, if I have a client or if I'm talking to a friend or if I'm on a pocket, I think starting there is probably one of the, if not the most powerful way physically. Like spiritual work is important. Like if you don't want to get better, you just probably won't get it better no matter what modality, how much you spend, whatever. But tight fascia is crazy because it can move your joint out of where it needs to be and you just stretch all you want, but it just springs right back to where it's comfortable, where it feels safe, which is within all that tension. So until you release that and it goes back to where it's supposed to be, the stretching, the exercise, the PT, in my opinion, it could be um, not the best way to go about doing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When people already have fascial tightness, like take in the instance of posture, a lot of people are here.
Pronated
And
shoulders.
yeah, I'm rounding my shoulders forward. And so anybody could say like, oh, stand up tall, pull your shoulders back. You go to a yoga class and like they're teaching you to pull back, pull back, pull back. But if you still have these rubber bands that are pulling your shoulders forward, it doesn't matter how much you try to stand up tall and pull those shoulders back. Those rubber bands, that tightened fascia in the front of your body is going to keep pulling you forward. And then you're essentially creating a fight in your own body.
Mm.
There's like a push pull happening in your own body. So by releasing that tension in the front, then somebody can actually start to retrain their scapula and their shoulders and their upper back to stand in a better posture. um yeah, it's when you're training really hard or even really light with excessive tightened fascia in your body, you're also training those fascial restrictions to tighten more, which unfortunately is why a lot of people, I have seen a lot of athletes, and it is a process of learning to unlearn a lot of stuff. Like I just to go back to what we said before, to learn to be a little bit more gentle with yourself. I'm not saying that people shouldn't train and people shouldn't work out their bodies, but there needs to be a balance of rest and release with training and doing.
If you want to keep exercising in the future, like I think that's your only choice because you maybe push yourself, but then you wake up the next morning and then you can't train for a few weeks. So instead of pulling back, being a little bit more balanced, although your friends or who you're training with may not want to hear it, but you got to listen to that internal voice. And yeah, this is great. I'm loving this. I feel like I could talk to you forever about this stuff. So this has been fun.
Same.
Me too. This is a great conversation. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm glad this has finally happened. And from the sounds of it, we probably are going to have you back on the show because this was a lot of learning information for people. But yes, I want to thank you for joining us today, Diana.
Yes, thank you.
And yeah, if you guys like what you heard, please recommend this to a friend, share, like, subscribe wherever you hear this. And we will join you guys next week. So thank you for listening to another episode of Consciousness at Play. We'll catch you guys next week.
Thank you so much for having me. I would love to come back. This was a great conversation, guys. You're great.
Thank you,
you.
Diana.
Thank you.